Hi guys, it's Judy here. Welcome back to my YouTube channel. Thanks so much for coming back. Thanks for watching my videos and for subscribing and just for watching. In today's video, I want to talk about plants that hang, and specifically some of the best low light tolerant plants that hang down. So in this case, you might be wanting some plants that hang down, whether you have a bookshelf or a high shelf or a plant stand in a space where you want to bring the eye up, or have something that connects a high shelf with a lower shelf. That's what plants kind of do. Bring the visual aspect of your space to the next level with some foliage, with some beautiful with some beautiful green accent pieces. That's what plants basically do in our space. And in today's video, I want to talk about some of my favorite low light tolerant plants, and I'm just gonna get started. Now I do need to make sure that I preface start this video by saying that it's important to remember that low light doesn't mean no light. So they still do need some form of light, whether it's a room that has a window like this one where the sun keeps coming in and out and messing with my lighting settings here. Let me just fix this. You're just gonna have to bear with me here. It's the afternoon and the sun is coming in and out. So whether it's a room that has a window like this and you want to put a plant in the far corner which doesn't get any of the bright direct light, or it's a room that only has artificial lighting, you still need some sort of light. Whether it's artificial lighting like grow lights, or you leave the light on, or a lamp that's close by your plants, they still do need some form of life and light source. Light for plants means life. So a plant really, even low light tolerant plants, won't survive in a completely closed up room where there's no light at all. So let's just make that clear before I start talking about these low light tolerant plants. Also, obviously, while they are low light tolerant, they won't grow as quickly as they would normally if they were in a brightly lit space. So while your plant might still keep its green leaves, keep its green foliage, not wilt or die or drop its leaves, it might not necessarily throw out as much new growth as it would if it was in its ideal spot, a brightly lit area. However, these plants that I'm going to be talking about today are okay in low lit areas. They just might grow a little bit slower. So now that I've said all that and got all that out of the way, I'm going to start with plant number 1. So this is a Hoya. I'm not entirely sure what variety of Hoya this actually is. When I got it, it had that tag where it just says Hoya species, but it doesn't actually say what variety. So if you guys know, any of you watching, know what variety this Hoya is, I would love for you to leave it in the comments down below. Let me pick your brains. Let me know what y'all think. I have this Hoya generally sitting on a high shelf there, and because it is so very long, it actually brings the eye down from the top of the shelf and it just cascades down and connects the high shelf with this lower shelf here, and it actually fills up the empty space that I have up on this higher bookshelf here. This doesn't get a lot of bright light, so the window is right here, but the sun doesn't actually reach up to the ceiling. It is kind of a little bit of a lower-ish lit area. Knowing that, it actually hasn't grown a fair bit. When I bought it, it was already this long, and it hasn't really thrown any new leaves out for me. That tells me it's not getting enough light. I am actually thinking of chopping this up at the nodes and propagating it back into the soil for a fuller plant at the top, because it is only one plant growing up the top there, but I'll probably do that later on once we come back into some warmer months here in Australia. It's a very easy plant. You literally just gotta water it when the soil is dry. You'll know when the soil is dry if you stick your finger in the soil and you can tell, you feel it's dry, or the leaves will grow quite soft and quite limp, and you'll know that it needs water as well. I've got it bottom watering in this plant at the moment. I haven't actually watered this for a couple weeks. Actually, it's probably more like a month that I haven't watered it, and the poor thing really needs a drink, so I've got it sitting in water right now. These Hoyas grow really super long. Obviously, they'll grow faster if it's in a brighter lit area, but it creates for such a really pleasing visual effect to have this sitting on a high shelf here and just have that cascading effect. It'd look even more visually appealing or a bit more of a wow if it had like 2 or 3 of these vines growing down, but that's gonna only happen if I had more than 1 plant growing in this pot, and that's also gonna take some time to get it to this long. But that's another process that I've got to do when it comes to warmer months. I'll chop and prop it back into the pot and I'll have an even more fuller plant. So that's plant number 1. This is a Hoya. Oh, I wish I knew what the ID was. I'm gonna do a bit of Google when I'm editing this video and I'll insert it in if I find out what it is. I think this is just the basic common variety of Hoya out there. There's a lot of Hoya out there actually. The next one I want to talk about is this Heartleaf philodendron. This one is actually a really fast grower if it's in a brightly lit area. However, it does still grow in lower light. This also hangs down like this, and it can get very, very long. Now, the fuller your plant is at the top, the more lush and more cascady the leaves are going to be. I have a few bald spots at the top of this plant here, as you can see. So what I'm planning to do is give it a bit of a trim, bit of a haircut, cut it back here and propagate those cuttings back into the pot, and that'll make for a fuller, lusher plant at the top, and as it grows, it'll start to look a lot more lush around the outside of the plant. This one, like I said, survives in lower light. It only needs to be watered when the soil is dry. Did I mention this is a heartleaf philodendron? Also, plants that are kept in lower lit areas will need to be watered less often because it doesn't have as much light absorbing through the leaves, drinking up the water. So if you do have your plants in a lower lit area, you won't need to water them as often. It's just a matter of keeping an eye on them and just making sure that they are okay within that space. Some of these plants might still not survive in your lower lit area depending on other circumstances. So it might not have enough airflow in that space, or it might not have enough actual space to grow. So like, for example, if this is like cramped in on a shelf, or maybe the soil isn't in good condition. It's just one of those things that you got to keep an eye on your plants and make sure it's got everything else that it needs if you're not able to provide it with that light that it really needs in order to flourish. That's a really stunning plant. I keep this on a high shelf over there in the corner in my dining room, and it's actually getting so super long. These are very, very easy to propagate. This plant actually started out with 1 single vine at the top of a very small pot. This is all grown from that 1 plant. I chopped and propagated it into the top of the plant. It's very easy to make them beautiful and lush and full like this. So that's another plant that hangs down. Another plant is the golden pothos. So this is a golden pothos, and this one here, can you see this? Hang on. All my plants are getting tangled up here. This here is a golden pothos as well, so they can get quite large. These plants, when they're lush and full, can get very, very long and look absolutely stunning hanging down as well. These don't need bright light in order to grow and survive. Obviously, they'll do a lot better in brighter light, but I actually have these pothos sitting on a shelf that is a fair few feet away from a window, and they're still growing really, really well. They're also very easy to propagate. This one plant here I made from cuttings from this mother plant. You only need to water these when the soil is completely dry, and just make sure that the leaves are clean of dust, and just feed it after every 2 or 3 waterings. Yeah, if you have a very full lush plant at the top, it'll make for a really stunning piece on your bookshelf when it grows even longer and starts to hang down over the rest of your shelf. So that's another plant that hangs down and survives in low lit spaces. This is a silver satin skin Dapsis. I know I said fast growing in the title of this video, but I just had to mention this plant because it is a beautiful plant that hangs down once it gets nice and big. It is a fairly slow growing plant compared to the other ones that I'm mentioning in this video, but I can't not mention it because it is absolutely stunning. It's one of my favorite hanging plants. Look at the leaves of this plant. The variegation on this is absolutely stunning. The leaves feel quite velvety and thick, and they have those little silver speckles on the leaves. The more light this plant gets, the higher the variegation is going to be on the leaves, but it's still going to be a fairly slow grower in my experience, regardless of how light the space is that it's in. However, I did have to mention it because I absolutely love this plant, and it's really stunning on a shelf, just with its dainty silver green leaves hanging down. This is a very special plant to me. I absolutely love it. All right, the next plant. This is a fairly fast grower. It's not hanging down as yet because it hasn't quite grown that much yet. But at this point of this life of this plant, I currently cut all the vines that were hanging down and propagated all those cuttings back into the top of the pot because I wanted to be nice and lush at the top before I started letting it grow and cascade down the sides of the pot. But once this plant grows big, it'll start to have vines coming down all sides of the pot because I have cuttings planted all around the edges of the pot there. So when it goes big, it's going to be super big and full and lush. This is a Marble Queen Pothos. I don't think I mentioned that before. And this will still grow in a low lit space. I have this in a spot that's a fair ways away from the window as well, but it's still continuing to throw off new growth for me. There's not really a whole heap to be said about this plant other than you just really need to water it when the soil is completely dried through. These plants are very easy to actually overwater. So you just gotta keep an eye on the soil before you go ahead and water it again. I'm just in love with the stunning foliage of this plant. Sometimes the white variegation will have brown little crispy bits like that, and that's just because the white parts of the plant don't have the green bits. So the green bits are the parts that absorb light. The white parts of the plant don't actually absorb any light. So if you have this plant in a lower lit area, there's not as much surface that can absorb light, so obviously it'll do better and grow faster in a brightly lit area. But also keeping in mind that the more light it has, sometimes the white parts of the leaves will actually go brown and crispy like this. So it's just keeping it in a happy medium, in happy space where it gets light but not too much light. It sounds fussy, it's really not that fussy. It's a very, very easy to grow plant. And again, once this grows long, it'll hang down and cascade down really super beautifully. This is one of my favorite plants. It's just so beautiful. Like, it's just so lush. I don't know how many times I've said lush in this video, but can't think of any other word to explain a lot of my plants. I'm so lucky with my plants. They love me back so much. Just love you. Love you. Okay, the last plant that I want to mention in this video. This is a Rabea Tetrasperma. As you can see, it's quite a rambunctious grower. I don't have this in a super brightly lit space. I do have it in a space that has some light. It's a few feet away from a window, but it still also has humidity and really good airflow in this space. This was actually one long vine that was growing out from this point here, grew out to one long vine, and I didn't like the way it looked, so I chopped that vine back and propagated the cuttings back into the plant, and that's what the rest of this full foliage is. And since I cut it, it started sprouting out from here and sprouting out from here. It's like two arms going out this way. This plant survives in lower lit areas, but it's still quite a prolific grower. Well, that is my experience with it anyway. This is a Rabea Tetrasperma, also known as a mini monstera. It likes to have its soil dry out between waterings. I try and fertilize it every single time I water, but with a diluted solution of power feed and water. And I just make sure that the leaves are clean of dust, and I check it over for pests regularly. Well, I check all my plants over for pests regularly, make sure that there's nothing there in its early stages that I need to catch before they advance and completely take over my plants. But yeah, the Rabea Tetrasperma, its care of it is pretty basic, and it's actually quite a pretty easy plant to take care of. Just give it a bit of light, give it a bit of food, give it a bit of love, talk to it, make sure its leaves are clean, shower it every so often, and it will be happy. And look at this. This is actually all new growth just this year. What's this year? It's already May, first week of May that I'm filming this video. This has all happened from the beginning of this year, which is 4 months. So maybe in the grand scheme of things, it's a reasonable amount of growth for 4 months. But I feel like that those 4 months have flown by so quickly. Anyone else? We're a quarter of the way through the year, guys. It's gonna be Christmas before we know it, and that's a really scary thought. This is the last plant that I'm sharing in today's video. Look at that. It's like she's dancing. Her arms are just like, Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. Hope that you were able to find some recommendations for a space where you need a hanging plant in a space that is lowly lit. If you guys enjoy these kinds of videos, let me know in the comments down below and maybe I'll make some more. Be sure to leave your questions and comments down there. I will get back to you, whether in form of a video answering your questions or just answering you in the comments. I'm always there and I always respond to you guys. So that's it for this video. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate you've chosen to spend your time here with me today, and my plants and I will see you all in my next video. Bye. And it's gonna, and yeah, what am I trying to say? Who decides to mow their lawn right now? Sorry if you can hear that. Let me just close my window.